When my boss mocked my wheelchair in front of everyone, he had no idea I owned the company. When I rolled into the Monday staff meeting, I noticed something was different. The conference room was fuller than usual. Department heads were there. Regional managers had flown in. Even people from headquarters were sitting quietly around the long glass table. I parked my wheelchair near the back like I always did, opened my notebook, and waited for the meeting to begin. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 38 years old, and I'd worked at Northgate Industrial Solutions for just over 3 years as a senior operations analyst. Most people knew me as the quiet guy in the wheelchair. Very few knew anything else. About 6 years earlier, a drunk driver had crossed the center line and crushed my pickup truck. I survived. My wife didn't. After months in the hospital and nearly 2 years of rehabilitation, I learned to build another life from a chair instead of my feet. I never wanted sympathy. I just wanted people to judge me by my work. For the most part, they did, except for my boss. His name was Victor Hale. Victor had only been promoted to regional director 8 months earlier, and power changed him almost overnight. He interrupted people constantly, took credit for everyone's ideas, and had a habit of making jokes that weren't funny unless you enjoyed humiliating other people. Apparently, I was one of his favorite targets. If I reached the conference room a minute late because the elevator was crowded, he'd laugh. Traffic jam in the handicap lane? People would force uncomfortable smiles. Whenever we toured warehouses, he'd walk too fast on purpose, then announce loudly, "Guess we'll wait for Daniel to catch up." Again, awkward laughter. Human resources heard rumors. Nothing changed. That Monday, Victor walked to the front of the room wearing his usual expensive navy suit. "Good morning, everyone." He clicked through sales charts for 20 minutes before stopping on an operations slide. "This department has been slowing us down." His eyes landed on me, especially when projects move at wheelchair speed. A few nervous chuckles escaped around the table. Victor wasn't finished. He grinned. "I suppose accessibility includes deadlines now." The room became painfully quiet. Nobody laughed that time. I looked around. Some people stared at their laptops. Others looked embarrassed. One woman actually shook her head. Victor seemed pleased with himself. Then the conference room door opened. Our corporate legal counsel walked inside, followed by 2 board members I recognized from annual reports, but had never met in person. Everyone stood. Victor immediately straightened his tie. I wasn't expecting headquarters. One of the board members smiled politely. "You weren't supposed to." He looked around the room before his eyes settled on me. "Daniel," I nodded. "Good morning." Victor looked confused. "You two know each other?" The older man smiled. "Very well." Silence spread across the room. He continued. "I believe everyone deserves a proper introduction." Victor forced an awkward laugh. "I'm sure we can do that later." "No," the board member replied calmly. "Now is perfect." He turned toward the room. 5 years ago, our founder retired. As part of his succession plan, ownership of controlling shares transferred into a private family trust. People exchanged confused looks. The man smiled toward me. "Daniel Brooks is that trustee. You could have heard a pen drop." Victor blinked several times. "I'm sorry?" The board member continued. "Mr. Brooks owns 51% of Northgate Industrial Solutions." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Victor's face lost every bit of color. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. I closed my notebook slowly. I didn't join this company because I needed a job. I kept my voice calm. I joined because I wanted to understand how every department worked before becoming involved in executive leadership. The legal counsel added quietly, "The board approved the arrangement years ago." I looked around the room. Most of you never treated me differently because of my wheelchair. Several employees lowered their eyes. I appreciated that. Then I faced Victor. "But you confused physical disability with weakness." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time since I'd met him, he had absolutely nothing to say. The board chair finally broke the silence. "Mr. Hale, please gather your personal belongings after this meeting. Human resources will assist you." Victor looked desperate. "Daniel, I was joking." I nodded once. "I know. That was exactly the problem. Real leaders never build authority by making someone else feel small." Victor slowly left the room without another word. Nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. It wasn't that kind of moment. The meeting continued. We discussed budgets, staffing shortages, warehouse safety, and software upgrades. Exactly the things we should have been discussing from the beginning. Over the following months, I accepted a formal position as executive chairman. The first company-wide policy I approved had nothing to do with profits. Every manager, from supervisors to executives, completed mandatory leadership training focused on respect, accountability, and workplace dignity. Performance reviews began measuring how leaders treated people, not just how much money they made. Employee turnover dropped. Productivity climbed. But the biggest change couldn't be measured on a spreadsheet. People stopped being afraid to speak. Years later, employees still tell the story about the regional director who mocked the quiet man in the wheelchair during a meeting. Most people remember it because he unknowingly insulted the owner of the company. I remember it for a different reason. That morning proved something I had learned long before I ever entered that conference room. Character always reveals itself long before titles do.